Welcome to the Castle of Spirits podcast, the companion piece to the long-running true paranormal story website of the same name. This is episode number 14. I am the ghost keeper, Jane.
How are you? I'm ghost keeper Vince.
Hi, Vince. Nice to meet you. Oh, we've met before.
And you as well.
Yeah. So, how's it going?
So first things first, last night I had, I think, an experience. I don't know if you would call it so much an encounter. So last night we were in bed and, you know, we have two cats. We have a black cat named Mr. Moon, has 4 legs. Mm-hmm. Then we have an orange cat named Canelo with 3 legs.
Right.
He's very skittish. He's been through some trauma. You know how it is.
Canelo.
He doesn't get onto the bed unless he's coaxed.
And when he does, it's an event. The whole house knows Canelo just got on the bed.
Right. And even he gets freaked out by it. He's like, oh my God, I'm on the bed.
It's loud. He finally, half the time, he jumps up onto the bed and his back feet are still dangling. And he's very fat. And so he's trying to haul this massive body up onto the bed with one arm. And there's a lot of kicking and thumping. And
Don't beef shame him.
Beef shame him?
Well, you know, I'm trying to bring that into the vernacular.
No, I'm not shaming him, but facts is facts. The boy is large.
So, and Mr. Moon, you know, he sleeps with us. He basically takes turns lying on your back. Mm-hmm. And then he jumps on my shoulder because I'm a side
or your
sleeper.
Face.
Occasionally he walks on my face, which is usually met by, I don't know.
Him getting thrown onto my back. Yeah.
Gently pushed.
Oh, gently.
With a couple of choice words on from me. Mm-hmm. Last night, this was not the case. Last night, I was sleeping and I was awakened by what felt like a depression at the foot of the bed, pressing the cover down over my feet.
As if a cat were walking on the bed or something.
Either that or as if somebody had touched the end of the bed or tried to touch my foot or something like that. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I was asleep and it woke me up. Mm-hmm. And
you immediately took cat inventory. Right.
I looked up. Mr. Moon was lying between us.
Oh, I thought you said he was sleeping half on your head.
No. He was fast asleep between us. And Canelo was nowhere to be seen. I looked at the foot of the bed and there was nothing there.
And if Canelo had jumped up on the bed, it wouldn't have been the weight of him walking on the bed that woke you up. It would have been the thump and scramble of him launching himself.
Right.
At the bed.
And you can't miss him.
No.
He's a big one.
Don't beef shame him.
And so, you know, with that, I thought, well, what is that? What was that? But I didn't freak out, you know, because these things happen.
Yeah.
I tend to write these things off as sometimes muscle spasms, things like that, you know, clothing even. Yeah. Shifting on your body, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. But this was there was definite pressure on the end of the bed. And, you know, there was nothing there. Mm-hmm. And, you know, you just go back to bed when that happens.
Yeah. I know it's funny. A lot of times, maybe we've talked about this on a previous episode, you know, when I'm listening to somebody tell a story or I'm reading a story off of the website and they say that something happened and I didn't think too much about it and I went back to sleep. And it's easy that, you know, when you're listening to a story or you're reading it and they say something like that you go, what are you talking about? You didn't think too much of it and you went back to sleep. If that happened to me, I would
call Ghostbusters.
It wouldn't be pretty. I would freak out, you know, but then when it actually happens to you, you think nothing of it. That's peculiar. And you go back to sleep because you can't take a little feeling like that and let it unravel your reality.
Right.
And then tonight, as we were getting ready to record this episode, I walked into this room to get everything set up to record. And what did I see, Vince?
A ghost?
Come on.
A time traveler winking in and out of our existence.
Never mind. I walked into the room to find that one of our little remote control battery candles was once again ablaze. They haven't been touched in months. And yet today, one of them was just burning away.
And so these things are controlled by remote control, right?
Mm-hmm.
You didn't have the remote control in your hand?
No.
None of the cats?
No. They don't know how to use a remote control.
Well, I don't know how to use a hammer, and I've managed to hurt myself several times.
That's because you don't know how to use it.
Good point.
Anyway, so, yeah. Creepy things are afoot in the castle.
No, that's pretty good, what you said about the feet, because it touched my feet last night.
I said are a foot, not a feet.
Oh, okay. Well, it touched my foot, too.
So I'm wondering, Vince.
Huh.
I'm wondering if you might possibly have a story that you would like to read the good folks today. Something maybe kind of spooky from the castle archive, maybe?
Yeah, because I went into the castle archive
and
I did me a little search.
All right. What were your search parameters?
Well, I don't remember how. I don't actually.
I used the keyword.
I don't remember what the keyword search was.
Recall.
I think maybe it was eerie. I don't know. I went into the Castle of Spirits library and I procured a brand new, to me, story that was published in December of 2010.
Ooh.
Right here on castleofspirits.com. And it was submitted by Jennifer in Texas, US of A.
Well, let's hear this.
It's called The Long Dirt Road.
Oh, I like it already.
Another encounter. Check it out. It goes like this. What I'm about to say is very real, and I am in no way embellishing or exaggerating. My only goal or reasoning in sharing my experiences with you is simply because, for lack of a better term, I am starting to become very afraid. It all started with my first encounter with the little people. From the day I first saw them, I knew I was witness to something paranormal. I had no reason at all at the time to feel afraid of them or threatened. But I will give you a quick description of what I saw that day. Yes?
I think I've read this story. I think I know this one.
Have you? Well, don't spoil it for anybody, okay? My home sits on the last paved part of the road that runs in front and continues for many, many miles. When you get to about 6 steps past my driveway, the road turns into dirt. There's no real lights on this road, and my house is the last house for miles. I had taken a walk with my boys and seen these little people on the side of the road splashing in the recent rain puddles and just having fun.
Yep, I've read this one.
This is getting weird. It was unbelievable, and since then, I've seen them many times. Now, this is where my story begins. After my first encounter with them, I saw them several times, and they were always very shy acting and would remain at a good distance, watching me curiously. One day, about 2 weeks ago, things began to change. I'm not sure what the reason, and it has me so scared that I'm having trouble getting myself to even take the trash outside at night.
Wow.
Now, I saw them that afternoon, just kind of watching me, and when I put my hands on my hip, they began to copy me. This is getting kind of cute, actually. It would be cute if it wasn't so scary. The smallest one looked just like the rest, but the others seemed to treat him differently, almost like a child. He had a black face and wore the same white clothes that looked very handmade. They all wore hats that looked exactly like a garden gnome, and they had very large heads for the size of their small, skinny bodies.
A garden gnome hat. I remembered hats, but I was picturing like Children of the Corn type hats.
So like Amish type
Yeah,
hats,
that's what I was picturing, yeah.
Or Nebraskan cult hats.
Sure.
Of some sort. That's where it took place.
Yeah, I know.
And we continue. The tallest one was no bigger than 2 feet or possibly 2.5. Okay, these are already bigger than I had imagined. I was
really?
thinking they were tiny, you know.
That's pretty tiny.
Well, you know.
2.5 feet, Vince. That's like this.
This is the Castle of Spirits, so I thought maybe they're 6 inches.
It's not the gnome mushroom of spirits. It's not like the Keebler elves of
mushroom.
Spirits.
No mushroom on my pizza, please. I'm kidding. I actually love mushroom on my pizza. Anyway, on this day, it was the smallest one who was copying me. When I had enough of this little game, I sat down on my mother's old wheelchair that had been sitting there on the patio. I stayed outside a few more minutes, and then I went in for the night. When I woke the next morning, it had rained, and there were very tiny muddy footprints leading from the tall weeds where I'd seen them, all the way up to the wheelchair and all over the seat. You could plainly see the tire tracks that were over the patio from the wheelchair, having been pushed around all over the place. I laughed to myself and just shrugged it off. Again with the shrugging off.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
Well, because
there's little monsters coming to your porch.
Well, it's better than, like I said, turning your life inside out because of one occurrence that you can't explain. It's easier to shrug it off and go, well, there must be an explanation than, to completely turn your world upside down and let go of everything you've ever known or believed.
All right. I'll buy that for now.
Okay.
This is where things began to change. Later that night, I was sitting on the sofa with my kids, and I caught a quick flash of something run past the large windows in the front of our home. I decided it had to have been one of the stray dogs in the area and continued watching the movie. Why don't you immediately think it's little monsters outside? Anyway.
Well, if I were living in that area, there wouldn't be any stray dogs.
They'd all be inside
They'd all
dogs.
be in the living room, cuddling with me on the couch.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Not that I'm judging her for not doing that.
No, she's got kids. They probably make enough of a mess.
Yeah.
It was not even a minute later when I began to feel like something was looking at me. It was nothing like the times I'd seen them. This was a very evil feeling. I was filled with fear, and I didn't want to look, but I made myself. And what I saw made me give a silent scream, and I swear my entire body felt like a bucket of ice had just been poured on me.
Ah.
I know the feeling.
The ice bucket challenge. Sorry.
The ice bucket little people evil gnome challenge. There, hovering about 3 feet off the ground, was the little person, but this time his eyes were huge and glowing like a cat's. Hovering.
Whoa.
She said hovering. The worst part, though, was the horrible smile on its face.
Ew, I don't like yucky smiles.
I know you gotta imagine there's no dental.
There's no dental plan in the afterlife or in the cryptid world. Mm-mm.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. But how do you know these are cryptids? What if they're elves?
Well, that would be a cryptid, right?
I don't know. I asked the question, are elves cryptids, a long time ago, and nobody answered.
That's true.
So I'm still waiting to know. Anyway, so this thing is smiling at her.
Yucky.
His mouth was very wide and went from ear to ear and was opened in an evil smile type laugh, showing off rows of shark-like teeth.
Ew.
I didn't hear him out loud, but it was more like he was putting it in my head, and I could hear his laughter and his chanting and some strange words that I had never heard before.
I'm kind of picturing a little bit that creature in Cat's Eye, that old 1980s anthology with Drew Barrymore, the little troll gnome thing that's trying to steal her breath in the middle of the night while she's sleeping.
Great movie. Mm-hmm. I never saw that until I think the last 10 years.
I showed you it for the first time. I grew up watching that thing. Yeah. Anyway, that's kind of what I'm picturing when the troll kind of smiles.
Jennifer continues, I began to close my eyes at this point, and I prayed to God to help me and to protect my children from whatever this thing was. When I opened my eyes, I was sure he'd be gone, but he was still there, and he was laughing even harder. I got up, and I led my kids to the back room to watch the TV in there. All right, kids.
We got to keep the kids occupied.
Let's not leave the house. I don't want to miss the last 5 minutes.
What are you talking about? Let's not leave the house. How are they supposed to go outside? That thing is out there floating in front of the window. How do you leave the house?
I don't know. The side door? You book it.
If it can hover like that.
You book it to the car.
And we know there's others. What if there's one of those things in front of every door and window? You don't know. These things are crafty and sneaky. And if they can hover, who knows what else they can do?
Right.
You can't. They probably slashed their tires too. And then you leave the safety of the house and run out to the car only to find your tires are slashed. And there's one hovering in the driver's seat.
At this point, I was so afraid that this thing was going to find a way into my home. And I didn't need a psychic to tell me that it wanted to hurt us.
I mean, with teeth like that, he didn't want to serve you vegetables.
Whatever that means. Chopped liver, anyone?
That's not a vegetable.
When it was time for bed a few hours later, I'd calmed down enough and I was doing a great job of convincing myself that I had seen something else and that my eyes were just playing off the lights or something.
Mm-hmm.
I laid down in bed, and just as I began to get comfy, I heard something hit my roof hard.
Ooh.
Then it sounded like something running across the roof, and it went quiet. Now, we've heard that.
Yeah, we've heard that a little bit.
We have raccoons in the castle, and sometimes they charge across the roof, and you just start imagining all sorts of horrifying things.
Mm-hmm.
I asked my husband if he'd heard it. So the husband's here all the whole time. And he nodded that he did, and he motioned for me to be quiet so we could hear.
Mm-hmm.
A few minutes later, we were sure it was a small animal until we heard what sounded like evil laughter coming from the air vent that leads to our attic. Oh no, it's in the house. It's in the house. Call Cryptid Busters or something.
That's nothing.
It ought to be.
Wow.
$1 million idea right there.
Okay.
Oh God, it gets worse.
Oh no.
It began to make scratching sounds on the ceiling and whispered my name.
No.
This continued all night until around 4 a.m. and then it just stopped. I went through this every night for 5 days.
No, that's too many days.
And in the meantime, my husband had gone up into the attic to inspect for animals or birds or any kind of hole that something could get inside, but he found nothing. Then, after the 5th night, it got worse.
How does that get worse?
I don't know, man.
This story is horrible.
Well, listen, I'm going to tell you how it gets worse. Jennifer says, I fell asleep that night, and I was happy to have not heard a peep when I got awakened by something sitting on my chest.
No.
And choking me.
No.
I couldn't scream for help. And I was sure that I was going to die. Yeah. I could smell this thing.
Ew.
And I could feel its skin on mine. It smelled like something does when it's dead and it's been lying in the summer heat for a few days. Oh. No.
Delicious.
Man, I don't know if I want to finish this.
You're going to finish it.
When I realized how strong it was, I began to realize that I had no chance of getting it off of me. And so desperately, I began thinking about Jesus, and I got an image in my head of him on the cross. At that very moment, the thing let go of me, and it had a look of pure horror. It now is on the defensive.
Yeah.
It began to move backward like someone had just pressed the rewind button on a movie.
Ooh, that's creepy imagery that I like.
It went back all the way to my bedroom door, and then it just stood there for what seemed like 20 minutes. It was staring at me with a look on its face that was indescribable. It looked just like it had every time before. But this time, it was completely naked and had no form of anatomy.
Ew, indecent little...
And its skin looked to be burned all over.
Ew.
At this point, I was able to move again, and I gathered up all my strength and quickly sat up and turned for the lamp beside my bed. When I looked back, it was gone, but there was a black spot on the floor where it had been.
Peed its pants.
I got up, and as I looked closer, I realized it was completely burned and still very hot to the touch on the area where it had been standing. I ran over to my husband, and he woke up easily, which made me angry, because how could he not have heard or felt anything at all?
Or smelt.
That too. He was probably just, pretending to be asleep because he was afraid.
Yeah, he's like, I'm not dealing with that. She's got this. That's what you would do. Nah, she's got it.
I showed him the carpet, and he looked at me and said, "Oh my God, Jennifer, what happened to your neck?" Oh my God, what happened to her neck? Now, before he had said anything, I hadn't even noticed like any burning or pain at all, but I looked in the mirror and I was horrified. I just couldn't believe how I had not noticed it before. There were deep burns on either side of my neck, and they were beginning to become very painful. Now, I'm not sure if it was in my mind since I was seeing it for the first time, but I became uncontrollable, and I was shaking with fear. The next day, I went to a local clinic in town, and the doctor said it was 3rd-degree burns. And he asked me how in the world had I managed to get burned on the neck in such a pattern that looked like hot handprints. I had nothing to say, and I sure as hell wasn't going to tell him the truth. Smart idea. I wouldn't do that. Now, since this has happened, I've heard it a few more times in my attic, and I'm in constant fear of another attack.
Yeah, I think it's time to move.
What if this time it doesn't let go? Why is it acting this way towards me now when it had seemed harmless before? If anyone knows anything about this or has a similar story, I'd be very excited to hear from you. I was told by a friend of mine that people around here call them duendes.
Ooh, el duende.
That was my search term.
Ooh.
I remember now. Which means little people in Spanish. And they say that they're tricksters and cause mischief. Other people have told me that they're elemental spirits. Whatever they are very dangerous, and I am in fear for my life and for the lives of my children. But not the husband. Anyway.
Well, I mean, he can take care of himself. And he did leave her to sleep. He slept through her attack.
No, that's true. So that was Jennifer in Texas from December of 2010. Jennifer, if you're still out there,
we'd love an update.
Give us an update and let us know. Now, at the very beginning, one thing I didn't read in the story was that Jennifer said that she had a story on the Castle of Spirits site already, and it was called The Long Dirt Road. Is that the story you're talking about?
Let me look it up real quick.
Okay,
Long Dirt Road. It's actually submitted by Anonymous in Texas, April 2010. Let me scan through it. Yes. This is the one that I read. I did not read it on an episode, but I have a little collection of stories set aside to potentially read on a future episode, and this is one of the ones that I had set aside. So the setting that she describes in the story you read and the little people, that's what I recognized. That's why I was like, oh, I've read this before. Because she does talk about the location of her house and she talks about the little people, but it's quite different. It's a very different story. So maybe we will read this next week.
Why don't we table that for now, and we can put a link to that story in the show notes.
Okay.
And if you want to read it next week, then we can.
All right.
Or at a future date. I would
read it today, but I have a story that I'm really excited to read.
Well, the thing is, I'm really interested in doing an entire show about El Duende. And why don't you, I think you're a little bit more well-versed on what El Duende really is.
No, I only know what El Duende is because of you.
It's a mythological it's a cryptozoological creature.
Yeah.
That people claim to see. And these are in Latin American countries, I believe.
Yeah, mostly Mexico, from what I understand. Here's the most that I know about El Duende. Many, many years ago, you and I found a video. It was either on YouTube or whatever happened to come before YouTube. It was a really bad early 2000s, first generation, my cell phone has a video camera type recording, really, really bad quality, which made it more realistic to me. I don't know, for some reason, if it's really bad old cell phone quality, it's more believable to me than good quality video. But there were these group of guys. They were hanging out. It was outside. It was nighttime, but it was fairly well lit. There were street lights everywhere. We have not been able to find this video in years.
I would love to see it
We've looked for this
again.
video so many times. If anyone recognizes the description I'm about to give.
Now I seem to remember, I could be wrong, but I think this was a video that was taken somewhere in Central America.
Oh, was it?
But I can't be sure.
I just know they were speaking Spanish. And they were just hanging out and they were talking. Is this the one where they were playing basketball?
I think so.
So, yeah, I think they were playing basketball and they're just joking and laughing. And all of a sudden, one of the guys starts saying, no mames.
No mames.
No mames. And the camera, the video camera like swings to the right or whatever. And you see this it looks like a garden gnome that's animated, but it's not like crappy CGI. I swear it looked so real. This little garden gnome creature comes like prancing out into the light, and it's kind of doing this creepy little like hobble walk toward them, and pretty soon they're all screaming, "No mames!"
And I think it was clothed, wasn't it?
Yeah, and it had like the hat on and everything, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
like the little garden gnome hat.
My instinct when I first saw that video was that it was a monkey of some sort. But I don't know.
The way that it moved, the body was like squat and short. It didn't have any kind of length to the arms or legs or anything like that. There was no tail. So like physically, it didn't resemble a monkey. But the way that it was moving, yeah, I could say, yeah, it did kind of look like a monkey in the way that it was moving. I'm like on YouTube right now, just giving one more quick glance to see if I can find anything. But like that video is just gone. There's apparently a band called El Duende. There's it looks like a really bad movie.
There's a movie?
Yeah, and then Leprechaun keeps coming up.
Leprechaun.
The movie Leprechaun keeps coming up. Isn't Jennifer Aniston in the first Leprechaun?
Is she the leprechaun?
That's a different topic.
Oh.
And so if anyone knows of that Duende video that we're talking about.
Or if you yourself have experienced a duende.
Oh my gosh, we need more Duende stories.
And have video footage or photographic evidence. Please reach out to us. Go to castleofspirits.com. There's many ways that you can contact us through the website.
Yep.
And we'll talk.
The lounge, email, if you have like a full story and you've got, like Vince said, video/photographic evidence, submit a story and upload those things to us. Yeah, we love duendes.
Now, speaking of stories, Jane.
Yes, Vince.
Aren't there a couple of correspondences that we have received that we have not yet gotten to? I'm interested in hearing those.
So we do. We actually received an email a couple days ago, Vince, from Sawyer, who says, "Hello, I'm a first-year high school teacher who majored in folklore, and having access to some of these stories for the unit we just did was very helpful. You may be getting some submissions from students I have in Virginia who've experienced the supernatural, and I just wanted to thank you for keeping this website up and running." Sawyer, thank you. We were so excited to receive that email. That's great. I love that this website is so old, in terms of website years. 25 years is so old. And, the fact that it's grown up with people and is now being shared with another generation of young people.
It's cross-generational, yeah.
Yeah, it's so exciting to me, and I just love to hear that, and I appreciate you taking the time to tell us that. And we can't wait to read their stories.
Absolutely.
So we actually got a message through the lounge a little while ago, and we just haven't had the opportunity to read it yet. And it's from actually a friend of ours named Paul. Hello, Paul.
Paul from Down Under.
Paul from Down Under. And he says, my mother used to do automatic writing or spirit writing or psychography. That's an interesting, I've never heard the term psychography. She did it for fun because she had read about it somewhere. She would get a notebook, lay it on the table, then rest a pencil on her fingers with the lead touching the paper and simply wait for the pencil to start writing. I should point out my mother was not crazy. Thank you for pointing that out, Paul. She kept her faculties in check right up to her dying day. Anyway, the pencil would write pages and pages of stuff, sometimes of vague descriptions of places and people. But one day, the writings identified itself as a gentleman named William Barry, who used to live in the same suburb as my mother, I think maybe 80 years ago. I believe there was a talk of wartime, World War II, and ships sailing out of Sydney Harbor as well. This went on for months, but then one day William said he had to go. My mother asked why, and he replied with, "Ravok is coming." Now, I'm actually not too sure of the name, but it had a V and a K in it. My mother always felt this was an evil spirit or something. But anyway, William never spoke again, nor did anyone else. My mother was never able to do spirit writing again. He says, she kept the book somewhere. I'll have to find it. Paul, if you find it, we would love to see that.
I wonder if is that an entire, it's just like a notebook or an entire book?
Yeah, I guess a notebook that she did the spirit writing in.
That would be fascinating.
Yeah, it would be seriously crazy.
Yeah, I know that automatic writing is connected to the ideomotor effect, the same thing the same principle that presumably guides hands as you're operating a Ouija board.
That's one explanation, yeah.
Right. However, I was looking that up recently because it's a topic that kind of really fascinates me. And I heard that there have actually been some high profile authors in recent history.
Oh, yeah.
Who have written books using automatic writing. Now, I don't think that I can't imagine anybody writing a book with a pencil.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds tedious.
But this was apparently done to great effect by the poet Lucille Clifton.
Now, I have one.
Oh.
Yes. A woman
I would hear of this.
A woman named Emily Grant Hutchings. She was apparently a proclaimed medium of her day. She claims to have written a book via Ouija board. The book was called Jap Heron, and she claimed that it was written through her by Mark Twain.
Oh, I've heard of this.
7 years after he died.
I've heard of this.
Yeah. Can you imagine writing a whole book with a Ouija board? I think automatic writing would be easier because at least you're just like flowing, right? Ouija board's like, you've got to have somebody else there. A, B, R.
Yeah.
And they've got to decipher where the spaces are. And I don't know. Although automatic writing, you've got to contend with really bad handwriting and potentially words written on top of other words. And
yeah. It would be interesting to read, though.
Yeah. I'm sure you can still find that.
I'm not going to strike it off my to-read list just yet.
All right. But you know what is at the top of my to-read list?
What's that?
It is a little story in the Castle of Spirits archive called Dark Autumn Skies.
Oh, God, that's a beautiful title. I'd like to hear this. Will you read it to us?
I will. It was submitted by Anonymous in Western Australia in April of 2002. This is an old story. I've recently enjoyed flicking through the accounts on this site and have thus decided to share a few of my own experiences. It seems that when I look back, I had a childhood that was somewhat filled with unusual sightings, feelings, and paranormal events. And paranormal is in quotes. There was one particular house I lived in New Zealand. I would love to live in New Zealand. Sounds so beautiful. Anyway, it was a 2-storied 1970s-style home built on a high hill, surrounded by other homes and an extensive road system. But its beauty was that it had panoramic views of the Auckland Harbor from 3 sides of the top floor. That sounds horrible. this being the main attraction for my mother and I when the two of us moved in. We rented the home from a young family who lived next door, whose elderly parents had once occupied our home. The only part of the lease agreement that we weren't keen on was that they had insisted they keep some of their parents' belongings in storage in one of the downstairs rooms. Both my mother and I disliked entering the room as it was always cold, musty, and their belongings had been covered in old drop sheets in cheesy horror flick fashion, no less, to protect dust and sunlight that entered the room's single window. To protect from dust and sunlight. There were many occasions where my mom and I were aware of another presence in our home. One particular day, I was returning from school. I was about 14 at the time. And I came home to find my mother sitting at the base of the concrete steps outside the house, looking a bit shaken.
Oh, that's not a good sign.
Mm-mm. I could see she was the color of ash, and she was drawing hard on her cigarette, attempting to absorb as much of the sun's warmth as she could, even though the long shadows of the late autumn afternoon were cast across the property. When I quizzed her as to why she was sitting there, she reluctantly explained that she thought she had felt something in the downstairs room that she had set up as a sewing den, which shared a common wall with the mildewy storeroom. She explained that an hour before I got home, she went downstairs to sew a few garments in the sunlight that was cast through the big windows. Sometime after that, she said she had an unusual feeling that she was being watched from behind somewhere deeper inside the house, through the doorway to the room. When she dismissed this notion and continued sewing, the feeling returned moments later. Only this time she felt as though something had entered the room and had crossed half the void between the doorway and herself, and was standing there, just staring at the back of her. She said she turned quickly and saw nothing, but couldn't shake the feeling. Again, moments later, she described the whole right side of her head and neck had rippled with goosebumps, and the sensation was as if someone were standing directly behind her, leaning with their face right forward over her right shoulder, glaring at her and her handiwork. She let out a small scream and fled from the room to sit outside in the warm sun and recollect herself until I got home. This occurrence seemed a one-off for a time, and then I experienced something myself. Again, late one afternoon, I was traveling home on the bus from school. The main bus route would see the school bus meander around our suburb and come down a hill that was overlooked by our home. I would often look up at the house as the bus traveled down the hill toward the bus stop as I was preparing to disembark. This particular afternoon, I looked up at the house and saw my mom standing in the dining room window on the top floor. She had short blonde hair and was wearing a black knitted sweater, and I shot her a happy smile and broad wave from the bus window just as it was stopping, and the view of the house was obscured by trees. She did not wave back or acknowledge me, and I figured she hadn't seen me. As I climbed the dirt track cutting through the back of our property and neared the house, I saw her walk through from the living room and appear at the kitchen window. I knew she was cooking up a storm, and I was eager to see what would be for dinner. When I let myself in through the downstairs back door, I chanted my usual greeting and heard no response.
Oh, that's not a good sign.
I climbed the staircase to the second floor and called out to her relentlessly. I wandered through the entire upper level, and upon entering the kitchen, saw a note on the bench top. It appeared Mum had nipped down to the supermarket for some groceries and had told me to grab a snack from the fridge.
What?
At that moment, I flushed both hot and cold and felt as though I weren't alone in the house. I ran from the house and couldn't believe what I had witnessed. Sure enough, 20 minutes later, my mum returned from the store with rosy cheeks and bags full of groceries. When I think back to this occasion, I can picture this woman clearly in the window. Now I can see that she was indeed not my mother, but had similar coloring and complexion. The innocent expectancy that a woman in our window was indeed my mum, who else would it be, had led me to believe it was her. There were no signs of intruders that day, and my mother's clothes were quite different to what I had seen this figure wearing standing in the window a half hour earlier. After that occurrence, things got a little more serious. Whoops. One evening, she and I had sat up watching music videos until late on TV. We were both tired and retreated to our rooms, which shared a common wall. It really had never occurred to me that my bedroom on the second floor was directly over the gloomy storeroom downstairs that was almost never opened or entered into, in all the time we spent in the house. This particular night, I had wished my mom a good night and closed my bedroom door. I was only moments in my bed when I heard a very loud series of 3 sharp and angry rappings through my floor from the room below.
Oh, no way.
It sounded as though someone were standing in that eerie black room with a broomstick thumping the ceiling of that claustrophobic space. I know. Mum yelled, "Oi!" from her bedroom, thinking that I was creating a ruckus. I shot out of bed and flew into her bedroom, explaining it wasn't anything that I had done and that the sound had come from the room downstairs. Mum was a bit panicked, as she was a single woman raising a son, and she felt that perhaps we had an intruder. She armed herself with a cast-iron bedside ornament, and I with a solid metal vacuum cleaning pipe. And then next to that, where he says the vacuum cleaning pipe, he's got parentheses with a question mark and an exclamation point, like, what the hell was I thinking? And we threw all the lights on in the stairwell. We slowly crept down the flight of stairs to the first landing and then rounded the corner to ascend the second flight. When we got down there, we found nothing in the house at all, only that the door to the storeroom stood slightly ajar. Though we loathed the idea of going in there, we flicked the switch and found it empty, aside from the usual shrouded mounds of bric-a-brac and dank-smelling furniture. Well, even at the age of 14, I was still not going to sleep alone that night, so I slept on the floor of my mom's room, naturally the side farthest away from her bedroom door. Several months later, we decided that we had such a large space for just the 2 of us, and we obtained permission from the landlord to advertise for a person to share with us. We had much interest, and eventually a woman named Marilyn moved in to the huge, redecorated, sunny sewing room on the ground level. She was a friendly, chatty woman who had much in common with us, and we really became friends. She also became aware that occasionally she felt as though she was being watched, but never really made a fuss of it. The top floor of the house was the main hub of the home, with all the main living areas, and at the end of the day, Marilyn would retire to her room downstairs. Occasionally, during the day, she would also take a coffee down to her room and read a book where there were less distractions. One bright morning, I awoke with the sun streaming through my blinds. My bedroom was at the end of a hallway that faced the kitchen. Along this hallway, doors opened off to other rooms to the side, as did the stairwell leading to the ground floor. I exited my bedroom and saw Mum making breakfast in the kitchen. I shot her a "morning" as I walked along the passageway toward the kitchen, and she turned and replied cheerfully. As I passed the stairwell that went off to the right, I glanced downstairs to the first landing to see Marilyn going back to her room. I shot her a brisk "morning," and she simply did not answer. I remember thinking, her hair is getting really long, as I saw her from behind. She reached the landing and turning left out of sight down the next flight. She was wearing a cream knitted top and rose-colored pants. Her long brown hair brushed pin straight down her back. To my surprise, my mum promptly answered, "I already said good morning." I replied, "No, not you, Marilyn," at which point I had already passed the stairs and reached the kitchen door. I walked across the kitchen and through the doorway to the adjoining lounge and saw Marilyn sitting on the couch in her dark blue robe, sipping a cup of coffee.
Dude, no.
She looked up and exclaimed that I looked quite startled. I flew back through the kitchen to the head of the stairs, babbling what had just happened, and the 2 ladies joined me, peering down to the landing of the stairwell. Once again, a very cowardly but thorough search yielded nothing. If you went and did a thorough search, it was not cowardly. I'm just going to put that out there.
Good point.
But again, the storeroom door was open ever so slightly. For a room that we kept closed, detested and seldom entered. Finding the door slightly open happened more times than I care to remember. Until this day, I can swear that I saw what I saw, and I have long since had other unusual things punctuate my life in a similar manner. We moved from this home, not due to any unrest or fear, just through regular circumstances of wanting to move on. I often wonder if the unusual entities of that home still haunt the bright and sunny corners of that house on the hilltop. Thank you so much, Anonymous in Western Australia in April of 2002, for submitting that story.
That was a great story.
It was so good. It was a little long, but it was so worth it.
But I could have listened to it go on.
I know. I would have listened to every story that they had.
What occurs to me about that story, and, even the one that I read, this, I don't know, I'm just going to say it. I believe them. I totally believe the experiences because both these stories have the ring of truth about them.
Yeah.
So, a part of me believes that there's something weird going on, that we don't understand the world we live in. We don't know. Sure. We don't know what's happening. We only see a very minuscule bit of what is there.
And we're seeing it through a very narrow lens of human experience. Yeah, I think that there are definitely things out there outside of our, and by our, I mean, humanity at large, not individual people who have experiences, who happen to catch like a blip in whatever the fabric is separating us from these experiences. But I think that humanity as a whole, we don't see these things. We don't experience these things. We don't understand these things. So when one of them happens to break through and somebody sees or experiences it, our natural reaction is to say, I don't believe you because I haven't seen that, and it's not something that everybody is seeing or experiencing.
And it's also uncomfortable.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Because it's the same thing I said about, well, that's why you say, well, I didn't think anything of it and I went back to sleep. Because to say, oh, that was absolutely something, is to not just really uproot your own belief system and turn that on its head, but really it's to uproot all of humankind's collective belief system and turn that on its head. And that's a much bigger feat, and not a feat that we really want to take on as individuals. And part of that is, I may accept what I saw as being something otherworldly, but I won't be able to convince everyone else they're going to think I'm crazy or that I'm making it up. So we do tend to kind of brush things off or look at it with a much more critical eye. Anyway. Yeah. Those are my 2 cents.
And a shiny 2 cents they are.
They are. I polished them just before this episode so they would look their best.
I must say, they're looking quite fine. And alas, we have come to that segment of the show where we realize that we really have a hard time saying goodbye.
Yeah, but the play-out music has started, and that means that we have to go, because when that play-out music reaches the end, it just turns us off. We just get cut off. So yeah, I think we're about to be cut off any second.